Hey, my name is Jesse. This is just another podcast where I talk with different individuals about different things in life. In podcast 4, I talked with Daniel Hagan. I first met Daniel in China when I began teaching English there. During the breaks between the classes that we were teaching, in the break room I would often see him reading books, playing blues on the guitar, or just being silly and making us laugh. I hope you can enjoy this talk that I had with this very good-hearted human. I cut parts out of this podcast because either one, the Wi-Fi connection was poor, or two, because I felt like it was a little too personal. So some of this podcast is a little bit choppy, so please forgive me for that.
In this podcast, we talked about the following three things. 1. What makes a good student? 2. What makes a good teacher? And 3. How to make a relationship last. Please enjoy.
Oh, it's so good to see your face. Hey.
Yeah, good to see you too. You look great, dude. You look strong and
Yeah,
healthy and handsome. Have you been playing? Okay, so maybe we can talk a little bit about teaching because I remember we were both working together as teachers, and
Yep.
in my mind, the way I perceived you as like you were like an amazing teacher, in the way that you were like very energetic and keeping the kids' attention and keeping things very interesting. Your spirits were high. And then you've obviously had a guitar teacher, you've had teachers teaching you language, and you've had some kind of maybe, I don't know if it's martial arts or some kind of fighting preparation teacher of some kind, right? Or something along those lines. So maybe can you speak on teaching and maybe what makes for a good student, and maybe after that, what makes for a good teacher in your mind?
Sure. Absolutely. First of all, I respected and I loved how prepared you always went into a classroom.
Thank
It,
you.
it was inspiring. You always spent an amazing amount of time getting everything ready and having things. So if things fell apart in one way, you had something else. I mean, no, yeah,
Thank you.
that was very nice. And you seem to be very hungry to learn what Adam was teaching. You were always, I think, what you it was you and Ryan who were always in those classes, which
Yeah,
was amazing.
I
Yeah.
think I just have anxiety and insecurities, so kind of preparing helps me to manage my anxiety and helps me to come into class with more confidence in the face of my lack of confidence and insecurities. So that's why I would do that. But, and of course, to just try to make things more organized and as best that I could. But I wasn't always organized. There's some days I was a bit more unprepared coming into the classroom than other days. But thanks for the compliment. I appreciate it. It's nice of you
No,
to say.
absolutely, man. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I've had language teachers and I've had good teachers and bad teachers. I've had martial arts and fighting and guitar and carpentry and
That's right.
a whole bunch of stuff. So what makes a good student? Um, okay, easy. I mean, at least in my head, an easy answer or the easiest, and I think most accurate, picture of what a good student or an excellent student is somebody who wants to learn. They're interested in what they're learning. Because I mean, you could have like you could be given the best and like the best material, the best circumstances to learn. But I mean, and you might still learn a bit, but if you're not interested, then your brain's kind of just running in neutral. It's not engaged. It's just kind of like, like yeah, this is cool, but as soon as somebody has an interest in what they're learning, as soon as somebody's excited about what they're learning, then even if they're a crappy student, they're like one of your favorite students. Like, because they're a good spirit to have in a class, and they're working at it, and they're just pleasant to be around. And it's just, as a teacher, it's nice to have somebody actually be interested and excited about what you can bring to the table to teach. Case in point, recently I started taking my nephews out fishing.
Yeah.
I love fishing. Since I came back, I mean, COVID hit, and I decided I needed something to get me outside so I wouldn't go stir crazy. So I picked up fishing, and I'm not great at it, but I'm getting good, and I just enjoy going out. I mean,
Being in nature.
yeah, it's amazing, and it's fun because I've stopped at their house a couple times with, like, big fish. There was one day, it was my unicorn from last year. My unicorn was a carp, which, anybody who knows anything about fishing is like, well, I don't always catch carp by accident. I couldn't catch a carp to save my life. I would go out and spend hours trying, and I couldn't get it. But I finally caught this carp, and me and my brother had been talking about it. We were working together at the time. I was like, dude, I got my unicorn. So I brought it over to his house and showed him and the kids, my nephews, and they were excited about it.
Nice.
And then, there was another time where I got a bass, and it was like right before like a big family like meeting, like at my brother's place. So I bring this big bass. I'm like, hey, Liz, my brother's wife, like, do you by any chance have a plastic bag? And she's like, well, I'm like, yeah, I got a fish in the car and I don't want it to spoil. She's like, again? I'm like, yeah. So I threw this big fish in this plastic bag, and it's just sitting in their fridge for a few hours. And I'm getting ready to, go, and my nephew Aiden and my other nephew Devlin are like, hey, Uncle D, what's that fish in there? And we get into this conversation about this fish, and it was it? It was this bass that I had spent like 40 minutes fighting to get in my boat, which is just a ridiculous time for that fish. It's not a huge fish, but what had happened was it was a super windy day, and I ended up getting tied up in this down tree.
Wow.
Like, and my fish that I hooked, like, is stuck like 8 feet under me in, like, this branch that's underwater, and I can feel it tugging on my line. And I'm sitting there, so I'm holding it, and I'm holding on to this branch so my boat doesn't fly away. And I'm fighting this fish, and the wind's going crazy, and I have waves coming over my canoe. It just went on for like 40 minutes. And I finally got this fish up, and like I was like, dude, I'm like, I can't do this. And like I was like in this like weird, like, like hallucinating, like kind of state of mind where it's like, you know what? I think I could just swim down there and get it. It's like, that's a good way to die. It's just like, I can't do that. But I finally got it up by like just pulling out, like, on the line and just being ready for it to break, and then like it budged, and I was like, what? And it came up with this branch and this fish.
You finally got it.
But yeah, it was super exciting because I got this fish, and it had like all these crazy, like, it was, white, but it looked like pearlish and kind of almost like unicorn, like horn, like colors on its like throat and things. It was
like a
super
rainbow.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. But so they're looking at this fish, and there's this crazy story behind it. Oh no, was it that one? Oh, it might have been a different one. No, that was a different one. That was one I caught. pretty easily. It fought like crazy, but in any case, it doesn't matter. But so they're
But
looking
that was
at
a
this
crazy
fish.
story nonetheless. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're looking at this fish, and it's this new thing that they've never been able to like look at or touch or see up close.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a story with it, and obviously I'm passionate about it, so it was fun for them, I think, to hear my story, because I get animated when I start talking about my stories.
Yeah.
And then my one nephew's like, well, can I touch its eye? I'm like, yeah, man, go ahead, because the thing's dead. And he's like, and he touches it. He's like, well, and he kind of freaks out, and pulls his finger back. And it instantly brought me back to when I was a child, and my dad or my mom would take me to the local fishing market where we'd get salmon or tuna or something. And anytime we'd go, for whatever reason, they have the fish on the ice. I'd walk up and I'd poke the fish eyes just because
Yeah,
it's something to do.
Yeah.
I don't know why. So it was this really kind of cool moment where I saw him do it. I was like, yeah, I did it too, and then he did it, and then my other nephew did it, and then eventually, they were like, hey, I think it was my nephew Devlin. He was the first one. He was talking. It was his birthday, and I was like, dude, I'm like, you know what? I'm for your birthday. I'm like, if it's alright with your dad, me and him will take you out fishing. He's like, that's amazing. And it ended up getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And then it got pushed back enough that it ended up tying into my other nephew's birthday. And then early this year, I finally got to take them out, and they both got fish. One of them, it was his first fish he had ever caught, which is super cool.
Okay, so magical moment for everybody.
Yeah, but I mean, so they ended up being, I mean, I enjoy teaching them because they're genuinely interested in it and excited to go out and try it, and watching them learn how to cast and reel and set a hook and everything. It's exciting for me because it's exciting for them to learn.
Yeah.
And it's fun because they're extremely receptive to what I'm showing them, and they learn quick. So I mean, for me, a good student is somebody who's interested in what you have
To offer.
that you can teach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then okay, great. So a student is someone that's very interested in what's being taught. That's a good student. And then what makes a good teacher?
Oh, geez. So a good teacher, I think the best teacher I've ever had is one of my masters. He does so he takes you on as an apprentice, in martial arts, but then he ends up teaching you about business and life and a whole mess of things. And which is very atypical for the modern day martial art master in China to do. And it's very he spent his entire life learning, going or traveling around China, learning all these martial arts, and then going out to different countries and teaching a little bit here and there. And he's started tons of businesses and bars and other things, and then he kind of closed them down on a whim or something weird happens. Crazy stories about him, but
sounds like an interesting character.
He's an amazing character.
Yeah.
But the thing that gets me about him is, and it's something that is so rare in the martial art community, or in any, well, specifically in the martial art community, is his approach to dealing with people.
Okay.
Where he can talk to anybody or be friends with everybody. And it's truly just this wonderful thing, because especially in that kind of community, I've had other masters who are just kind of toxic, where it's I'm the best, that's it. But he's willing, is he'll say to himself that he's not a good teacher, he's a good principal or a good headmaster. because he can bring in other good teachers to teach his student. If he doesn't know how to do something well, he'll admit to it, and he'll be like, "But I know so and so,
Yeah.
and I'll bring you to them." But I think he's the best teacher I've ever had, just because I see in him something that's, I think, incredibly rare in people, which is this ability to envelop like a porcupine. Like he can get along with anybody, and it's wonderful. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so what I'm hearing is what makes him, in your mind, an extraordinary teacher compared to other teachers you've had in your experience in life is the way he deals with people is not only interesting, but he can get along with anybody. He doesn't have problems with people, and he has this certain humility that also kind of enables him to be a better and a more able teacher than had he not had that humility. Am I getting all the main
Yeah.
points here?
Yeah, and outside of that, the guy is just incredibly just creative and imaginative. So like that people's focus is real short. Like
Mhm.
that a lot of people can't stay focused on something if it's not interesting, or so he'll do the same thing that Adam or a whole bunch of people at ME used to do, which is, as soon as you can see a class kind of falling apart because they've kind of lost interest in what you're teaching or how you're
Mhm.
teaching, then he'll be like, you know what? So we're going to do this now. Like every
Change.
time he'd be like, all right, so instead of like coming and hitting a tree today, he'd be like, well, here's this punching glove on this end of the stick, and I'm going to, hit you with it, and you need to maneuver around it. Or,
Yeah.
or, today we're going to take this freaking 15-foot long spear, and you're going to train with this. And
Yeah.
then, as soon as he sees that you had like a little bit of success, and he's like, all right, he's like, well, now I want you and so to take that down into the river and do what you were doing up here in the river and try not to float away. Through all these weird, bizarre things, you'll find that like he's teaching you these foundations that could be considered very boring or very hard to learn. But he's like, well, here's all these different ways of learning this one thing. And eventually your brain kind of clicks and it's like, oh my gosh, like, I get it. But he's
Nice.
just, I don't know, I love the man just because he's, he's an amazing person. He's an
Yeah.
amazing
Well,
person. He's fun to be around. He's insanely intelligent, and he knows how to harness his intelligence without making it seem like he's above you and you're below him.
that's beautiful.
You know, yeah, yeah, he's a phenomenal, beautiful human being.
I'm glad that you got to meet him, and I'm glad that you've had such a inspiring and incredible teacher in your life. I think one thing also that has stood out in my mind about you um, is that when people throw kind of like a ball of negativity towards others, even if it's not directed at them, but they're just vomiting their negativity due to maybe their own suffering or just their bad headspace at that moment. Um, Sometimes I notice that other people will do the same thing as a reaction or a response to like express their
Oh,
negativity as well. And then some people, it seems like they'll just ignore it. They'll just listen and ignore it, you know. Um, but with you, I've actually tried to kind of copy you in a sense. I fail to do it often, but like you kind of shine some light on that you can respond with trying to redirect people's bad headspace into a more positive place. At first, like when I saw it, it seemed almost a little bit, I don't know, abrupt is a bad word, but it's almost like the train of positivity had gone off the tracks and you were trying to get it back on the tracks in the way you responded. It's like they're in this negative headspace and you're like, hey, or you can try to get back into this positive perspective of seeing things. And I think that's the best way to probably respond to negativity, because obviously I think every human would like to be in a positive headspace. And if someone's expressing that negativity, then they're suffering. And by trying to get the train back on the tracks of positivity, you're doing a service to them, you're benefiting them, and it's an activity. I mean, it's a response of love. So at least that's how I interpreted your habit and your action. And I'm grateful for you teaching me that so that I can try to help others get back into a more positive headspace when they're expressing their negativity to me. So thanks for that.
Well, something I learned from you was we had gotten into a conversation about spirituality and things and negative things coming, and your idea of, instead of being combative, essentially inviting the thing in and being like, hey man, what's going on? Yeah, that's turned into a lot of other things for me, where it's I don't know if we have time, but
No, yeah, we can continue. We have time. Yeah, if you want to continue, we can. Yeah.
But I think it's, I don't know if it's a Western thing or just like a knee-jerk reaction for people as a whole, where it's, you know, when something bad comes, the first thing you want to do is just shoot it down, or shoo it away. I think specifically from kind of a Christian, or, you know, or a Christ faith-based kind of thing, spiritual battle kind of thing. It's kind of like, well, this is a bad thing, I have to eliminate it.
Yeah.
But your whole comment that day about, like, you know, instead of shooing away a demon, being like, hey man, what's going on?
Yeah.
It kind of opened my head to a different thought, which was like, you know, God brings good things and bad things into our life, or that's going to happen, and it's needed to learn from both. You know, life is this weird thing where you have all the flavors, you know, sour, bitter, spicy, sweet, whatever, salty. There's the other one. So there's something to learn in each and every step of it. And instead of, you know, knee-jerk reaction of, you know, telling something to go away, you know, I mean, that might still happen, but taking the time to kind of reevaluate where that came from and look inward and be like, what started this? Was this something that I did? Or was this something that kind of came about? Is this something that's external or internal? And I think that all kind of started from that conversation with you.
Interesting. Yeah, that's awesome. That inspires me. Like, that seems like a process of compassion and empathy. And I think my internal immediate mental reaction to your words were, I try my best to be positive and empathetic and understanding, and trying to figure out what is the stimulus of this. And then there's this line that I walk where, how long can my patience take me? Because if I go too far into the darkness of another person and open my heart up to it compassionately and empathy, sometimes there's so much darkness and negative emotion that they finally have the space to express that. Sometimes it really works, and sometimes it triggers internal negativity in me and awakens my own demons, and then it becomes counterproductive. So trying to have the self-honesty to know when my patience is gonna run out. And my patience is not the same every day and every moment. Depends on how much sleep I've gotten and how healthy I've been eating and how much stress I have, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just like that self honesty in that moment on how empathetic and patient I can be at that time. So, but yeah, I think you're touching on an important point. And maybe there's some moments where responding more immediately with trying to set the train on the tracks of positivity due to maybe that's the best action at some times, and other times when we have more patience, time, energy, and open empathy, kind of like energy to take on the negativity, then we can do that. I guess it depends on the context we find ourselves, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've recently had some confrontations in my marriage with my wife where I found that my constant, trying to redirect the train was shooting down narratives that needed to be spoken. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, like you said, there has to be a balance.
Yeah.
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 But I mean, also, yeah, like you said too, I mean, it comes down to patience. I mean, a buddy of mine, he has a comment of because he went through in his early 20s a whole bunch of health issues, and he just ended up having no energy. And he has a metaphor which is he only has a certain amount of spoons he can give out in the day,
Interesting. Yeah.
and when the spoons are gone, there's just no more spoons he can give. So it's
Yeah.
just at that point he needs to walk away from kind of everybody and just be alone.
Yeah.
I think when you're talking about that whole patience thing with like, how much of other people's stuff, you can kind of be in and be there for them and be present and caring and loving and compassionate. It's dependent on your patience, or his thing with the spoons, whereas yeah, I mean, eventually you kind of hit this point where it's like, and now both of us are boned and there's no way out.
Yeah. What do you do at that point? Maybe that, yeah. I think that's what's great about, different religious prophetic kind of beings. They, for me, and I assume for many others, they inspire us to try to be able to generate and offer more spoons in a day than we used to be able to like develop more love and compassion. And then it comes back to, yeah, how that self-honesty to be like, I am not a prophet, I am not Jesus, I am personally far from it, and today how many spoons do I have left, or have I run out of spoons? And then at that point it's all about, do I need to take a nap now? Do I need to go on a walk now? What do I need? Do I need to listen to some music now? And it can be hard sometimes, especially for the people that are closest to us, when they really need more spoons at that time, but we feel like we don't have any more spoons to give. It can be a heartbreaking. It can be a heartbreaking moment because we want to give the spoons, but we're out.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and then I don't know. It's kind of a sad part of life. It would be lovely if we could always just keep giving spoons to each other, but
got a whole bunch of spoons. Got so many spoons. Check out this silverware drawer.
Jesus like opens up his clothes.
He was just walking around with a freaking trench coat. He's like, "Hey man, got some spoons. You want some spoons?"
Someone's crying. He just gives a spoon. A beautiful metaphor.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Oh,
Daniel. Thanks for this
no
conversation,
problem,
man.
man.
For people that like aspire to have more kind of long-term relationships and to keep that ball rolling with another individual, and would prefer not to end the relationship and try to find someone else, what, like when you face hardships in your relationships, what's like, how do you continue to bring things back to love and um, keeping things positive again? And
Jeez.
is,
All
you
right.
want to pass on that question? You can pass on it. I don't know.
No, absolutely not. That's a
Because
great question.
in my opinion, like I've never had a relationship as long as you've had your marriage, nothing close to it. It seems like, I don't know, maybe it's my lack of patience, my lack of love, my lack of compassion, my lack of empathy, or something, or my crazy mind that thinks that the grass is always greener on the other side that makes my relationships end. But like, I don't know, how do I become someone that can be more persevere in relationships and to try to keep the ball rolling and keeping things working? How have you done it?
um, Jeez. Okay. Um,
Sorry.
Before my wife, uh, I had two longest relationships. One when I was 16, which was terribly unhealthy.
Uh-huh.
Um, One when I was 17 or 18 with a very lovely person. And that was okay, but I was still kind of a dick. When I look back on like all my relationships before my wife, I could just kind of like, before her, like it was always like, yeah, no, it was like so and so's problem. Now like when I look back at it, it's like, no, like, yeah, no, I was an ass. um and then I met my wife, and everything kind of changed. And so I think there's a lot of things when it comes to a long-term relationship. Um, right person and communication. Communication is effing everything.
Okay, so then can you speak
And
on communication and how to communicate in a way that facilitates, the fruitfulness and positivity of a relationship as opposed to communicating and then making the relationship more of a problem than,
sure.
yeah.
Um, and this is something I work on, and I freaking frack up frequently, and then every once in a while I'll do it correct. Um, Learning to shut my mouth.
Listen, right?
Yeah,
So a big
because
part of communicating is
yeah,
listening.
yeah, because I'm finding slowly that a lot of times people want to talk, and they don't necessarily, when people start talking about the problems, they're not necessarily looking for you to actually give advice. They just want an ear. And then I feel like it's a quick reaction for me all the time where it's like, oh, you should do blah 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 blah. Like clearly, like that's the right thing to do, and it's never. It's very rare when that's the correct reaction. But so earlier today, I was in a argument with my wife. Well, not an argument. It was a discussion of sorts. It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't an argument. It was discussion about things, and me not able to wrap my head around it, and it was aggravating as could be, and I could feel myself because I mean I didn't get a lot of sleep, and we had been talking about this thing for about 2 days,
It
and
sounds very frustrating.
yeah, and I'm working while we're doing this, so my brain power also has to be on what I'm doing at work,
Yeah, it's
and
hard to do things,
it's a
two things at
physical
once.
job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just frustrated.
So
So
you're at work, you're trying to do two different
yeah,
things at the same time, do your job and have this conversation. It's a conversation that's continuing for 2 days. So there's something about it that needs to be maybe resolved or at least listened to. And you're talking about trying to communicate, and sometimes advice isn't
it,
needed. And sometimes we just need to listen, not enough sleep, you're
yeah,
frustrated. And
oh, super frustrated. Yeah, and it was just clearly there was something going on that was upsetting our relationship. There was a zit that needed to be popped.
yeah,
And yeah, so I could feel myself getting real frustrated and wanting to kind of be like, listen, blah blah blah. And I realized that it wasn't the right reaction. It wasn't. It was a kind of closed off defensive reaction, and I can't remember if the phone call dropped out. No, no, it was still going. But I prayed because
okay. So the you had, were you trying to give advice? You had some kind of a response, and you didn't feel in your heart of hearts that it was the correct response to give at that moment. And then
it wasn't
either,
even advice. It was just this kind of nasty defensive-ness that
oh, was it like a
didn't
reaction
didn't
that you
have a
didn't feel right about?
yeah, it was and it was something that had happened in like in dealing with the same situation before, and it was just it wasn't the right thing to have happen. She clearly needed somebody to comfort her, and my reaction was the wrong one, and I could feel it kind of starting to happen. And yeah, I just felt like something was wrong, and it was like, no, this isn't right. And you know, you could say it was bad night's sleep, tired, stressed out, body's a wreck. I mean, those are all things, but I also just felt like it was just this weird, nasty kind of spiritual thing. And it was like, no, this isn't right. And I was praying about it. I was like, I'm like, clearly, I'm like, I'm not in the right here. I'm like, if something's off, I need to know, like, what's the correct thing or the correct way to do this. And I got this word in my head, which was understanding and love. And I was like, okay, cool. So that's how this ends. Like, I need to end whatever nasty this is. Like, it's like, all right. And then things turned around, and we actually had a really nice, healthy conversation. And it ended up just being me being stubborn to what she was trying to say and her being right. But it took a long time to get there. And to that, I mean, it was my wife's patience that ended up getting us there. But to communication, um, I don't know about you, but I mean, for me, before my wife, I I was this weird, angry ball of nasty, prickly energy. It's just
I can relate. I can relate. I feel like I kind of still am that way sometimes,
me
but I
too.
feel like I'm less of that than I used to be.
Yeah, but I feel like as soon as I don't know, just it was I had somebody that I could actually communicate with and talk about anything with, that things really started to change. And I feel like communication is, I mean, not even just in a relationship, but just for general human
Well-being.
life. Yeah, is just this. I don't know. I mean,
Vital and is super important. Or no?
yes, yeah. So I mean, a long roundabout way. I don't feel like I've actually answered your question.
Yeah, you have. Okay, so is it okay? I wrote down notes. So like,
Oh damn. Okay.
I think it kind of comes back to, your wife having the patience is coming back to finding the right person, because, if you're going to a relationship as someone that feels like a prickly ball of angry energy, and that other person that you're in a relationship with doesn't have the patience to deal with that, then it may not be the right relationship, because their lack of patience may make for a very difficult conditions for problems to be resolved. And then,
Yeah.
I don't know, that's my interpretation of some of your words. And then trying to not be a dick, which is easier said than done. And then, of course, again, just finding the right person. And advice isn't always needed. Trying your best to listen at times. And when you're running out of spoons, so to speak, digging deeper and going into that state of prayer where the mind is more focused, and digging deeper to our reserves and our inner strength. And then we may find certain answers in times of need, and that particular condition, understanding and love, which is often a good solution to many situations. And then having the humility and the self-honesty to know when maybe our own choice of words or actions is creating more problems than it is being part of the resolving the problem. And then obviously whatever kind of patience we can bring to the table will probably help.
Just one quick add-on is that, I mean, it has to be the right person for both people. Because I mean, if one person is just always negative and it's always the other person giving, I mean, I think, at least for me, I don't see that as a healthy thing. I think it has to go both ways, and that's something that I try to do, which is, if somebody is angry, I try to stay level-headed, because I feel like as soon as two people are both angry, that any logical or, good discourse has just gone out the window. Or if both people are beyond sad, I know sometimes I feel like if that's the case, then there's nobody there to help. Or if, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's important. Yeah.
I agree.
So, I mean, you have to, there's, the whole sharing in each other's happiness and sadness and everything else, but it's sharing. So it's not one-sided. It's sharing. It's coming together.
Both sides have to make effort. We have to be receptive and keep trying our best to be giving and to work together.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I wish you the best. I'm grateful that I've gotten to meet you. You are a positive and fun character with so many great qualities, kindness, and your humor is awesome. Your humility and lighthearted personality is beautiful, and your courage to travel to China and learn a new language at such a young age is admirable, and you're just an overall really interesting character. Thanks again for having this conversation with me, dude. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, dude, I love you, man. I love talking to you. You're a beautiful person. I always learn something.
Thanks, Daniel.